Hello, everyone. This week, we are speaking to best-selling author, literacy influencer, and ex-professional rugby player, Ben Mercer. Ben shares his journey from sports to writing, how to deal with the next steps of life after retiring, which just so happens to be the topic of his first book, and how social media was a key tool for sharing his opinion on his true passion, books. We give a flavour of all 4 books Ben has had published, and I can speak from personal experience. They are a brilliant read. Enjoy. Ben Mercer, welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming down. A nice day for it. How have you been?
Great. Thank you. Yeah. Enjoying the sun for once.
So to go into it, you played rugby for how long was your career?
I stopped playing when I was about 31. So yeah, I mean, most rugby players probably pathway wise get into sort of playing school rugby, academy rugby, at a club, like attached to a premiership club. And that's the same for me. So while you're not being paid, you're in a kind of academy system from the age of 14 or 15. And then I went to university after school, but I was always kind of attached to an academy and playing club rugby and getting paid. So yeah, from sort of as a serious endeavor, probably from 18 to 30-ish with, varying degrees of commitment.
Yeah. So take me through, just for people listening as well. So you start when you're 18 to retiring. Take me through your career.
So I left school. I grew up in Bath. Bath is, super sort of famous, prestigious old rugby club. Successful back in the day, kind of getting successful again now, but definitely had a sort of fallow period. But Bath's a small place and it's an easy ambition to develop when you're, a kid growing up there. So I had a year there when I left school and I was applying for universities at the same time, sort of seeing if I was going to get offered a deal or not, and then make my decision off the back of that. And I didn't. So I went to uni in Newcastle, got attached to their academy, went on loan in the end to Blaydon, who were a local team in National 1, and that was super fun. So we had a really good team and had a great year doing that in my final year of studying. Then I went full time. I went to Plymouth Albion in the Championship. I think they just turned it into the Championship, and it was quite exciting because there's lots of very good players. I think Bristol had been relegated down from the Premiership. They had a great team, and then Exeter, that was the year they actually got promoted. So it was a really competitive league, and we did very well in that first year. Second year, we did less well. After that, I ended up having a move fall through. So I went to Sydney, played a year in Sydney, came back, played for Cornish Pirates. Then after that, I was a little bit sort of umming and ahhing about what to do, and I got an offer to go to France, and I ended up spending 4 years in France at Rouen. And yeah, then at the end of those 4 years, I basically was like, I could kind of eke out another couple of years of rugby, but I'm a bit over it. I don't have too many demands on me from elsewhere at the moment. So I think now's quite a good time to take kind of leaving rugby head on rather than trying to kind of carry on as long as possible and then have to start something new age 35 or something like that. So I made this sort of decision after I left Rouen. That was that.
And how long did that decision-making process take?
Not very long, because, you have your off-season, don't you, about a month. And then after that, if you've got nowhere to go, then you can hang around. But yeah, I was talking to a couple of different places. I was thinking about maybe going, to a different country to go and play. And in the end, there was nothing that was particularly appealing enough to me. And I just thought, you know what, I'm going to stay back around Bath where I was from. And I basically had enough kind of runway to be a bit experimental. I tried, went and did loads of different work experiences, worked for a friend's dad's business to learn a few things. I basically did a load of courses. So it was a period where I could just try a lot of different things without having to commit to like a new direction immediately, which was helpful, but it didn't give me an immediate answer either. So,
and you moved into writing books. Eventually. When did you start writing books?
So I did English literature at university, so books were always like my other passion. So sport and books, they were my things. And luckily, when you're playing sport, you're on buses a lot. So, conversation runs dry quite quickly in the, as you probably know. And so I'd bring books and, I was always very happy. And when I lived in France, the bus journeys got longer, so I got even more time to read books. And I think like when you're reading, you naturally kind of develop this ambition on the side where you're like, oh, one day I'll do it. And once I stopped playing rugby, I started, like I said, I did some courses and just thought, I'll explore this in quite a low key way. And I always recommend it to people. It was called Start Writing Fiction. And it was a course at the Open University online, and it was free. And the thing was that you submitted assignments. It was all anonymous. And the more feedback you gave to other people on the course, the more feedback you got on your own writing. And that was really helpful. So it kind of helped me develop some confidence and a bit of practice, and exposed me to some other people's writing who are in a similar kind of point to myself, I suppose. And after a while, after, the end of that year, I actually wrote something and was encouraged to put it on LinkedIn, which, is some slightly inauspicious place to start your writing career. But it was just a very clickbaity, here's 6 lessons for retiring rugby players. And it did really well. So then people started bringing me other writing work, and I was doing some ghostwriting stuff. And then I started doing some work for a rugby blog. And so it just got me going and got me rolling. And I think the thing was really useful was doing it in the first place anonymously, and then taking this like bit of a leap and going, oh, here's something like in my name. And then, that sort of taught me that if you do that, if you do get over that hump, like, good things can happen.
Yeah.
You have to get to this point where you ask yourself, like, is this what I actually want? And if it is, then you just have to get over yourself a bit and do it. And I really think that did happen for me. I spent that first year after rugby dabbling a little bit, but being a bit non-committal. And that was a point, it was only a small commitment, like one public piece of writing, but it was, oh yeah, like I'm going to have to do it and just sort of try and decouple myself from the outcome. And I think with the first book, I was super nervous about how it would be received. I was kind of pushing back. So I self-published it, and I was pushing it back and pushing it back. And in the end, I realized I was just tinkering around the edges, and I wasn't really doing anything particularly important with it. And so I set Christmas as like a line in the sand, because you could set a date, but Christmas felt like very concrete.
Yeah.
It's a big thing. Yeah. And then also soon after Christmas, it turns into another year, doesn't it? So right, you've got to do it by Christmas. And I was very, very worried about the reception, but luckily the reception was good. And I think even when the reception wasn't good, even when people didn't like it, I was able to become a little bit more equivocal about it. And I think when you've it's all very important to you, but once it's done, it's gone. It's a bit like playing a match, like in the immediate aftermath, if you've had a bad game, you're really disappointed with yourself, but by the time the meetings roll around in the week, you can probably be a little bit more analytical and be like, okay, yeah, that was bad. Why was it bad? Or that was bad. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm going to let it go, and athletes do develop that kind of mindset, I think, because you have to, not every week. You're not going to be a world beater every week, are you? Or maybe never. So I think like those kind of attitudes are helpful for other, creative work or, social media work, those sorts of things. I think like it's a good mindset. I think once it's gone, it's kind of gone, and you just sort of take your licks and get on to the next one.
Yeah, that's true. I think kind of what you said there about as an athlete after the game is done, you can flush it. I always found it hard in the game. If I had a bad start or something like that, players will say, yeah, just flush it. And I just think, how?
Yeah.
How do I just flush it? Like I'm feeling it right now. I just did it and now I'm worried. What will that do further on? That's just pressure, I guess.
I've actually got something great. I remember going to a game, it was a Bath Wasps game, and it was when Danny Cipriani was playing for Wasps, and I don't know him at all, but he got charged down doing a chip and chase, and Bath scored. And then the next time he got the ball, he did another chip and chase, which he caught, and then Wasps ended up scoring. And I just thought, oh, would I have done, like, if that was me, I don't think I'd have tried that again. But he knew what he'd seen. He'd seen something. He had just got it wrong that time. But in his mind, getting it wrong once didn't mean he'd get it wrong again, which was super interesting to see happen, and that's probably the mentality why like the better people are the better people in some way, it's not, I thought, oh, I don't know if I'd have done that,
Yeah, that's impressive. I think I'd be putting the chip away forever if that happened to me once. But the other one, I had a teammate that used to play with Finn Russell.
Oh, yeah.
And he said after a game, it was almost impossible to know whether he'd won or lost because he was just happy-go-lucky, whatever. He'd lose by 50, win by 50, exactly the same. Almost like, well, I'm not really bothered by the outcome. I had a good time playing. I did what I felt was best. That's it. And I think you're probably right. Less up and down than probably other players feel the pressure, and probably a bit more outcome focused. But you think that translated quite well into writing?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's lots of kind of obvious carryovers, I think, with your habits. There's actually a good book by a Japanese author called Haruki Murakami, who writes these like slightly kind of offbeat novels. They're always like quite dreamy or, you know, a little bit like strange. But he actually has this very kind of prosaic nonfiction book, which is called What I Talk About When I Talk About Running. And so he's quite an old guy now, but he's been a runner for a long time, and he runs marathons and, you know, maybe longer races. I can't remember, but the book is about, you know, the kind of dual energies he gets from both practices and what they have and how they relate to each other. And I think, you know, with writing, like the way I did my first book was I set a minimum daily word count that wasn't really, really big. It was like, okay, it was a kind of tiny habit, atomic habit sort of informed practice, where it was like, I know that every day, regardless of what else I've got going on, I can write 500 words. It's not loads. You know, I could thrash it out in 15 minutes. They would probably be bad, but that's fine. I made no quality expectation on myself whatsoever. And actually just that checking in every day, it sort of reinforced that it was important to me. It helped me feel like it was always moving forward. It gave me raw material to work with, like a shape later, even if it was bad, you know, at the time. And I think with athletes, you know, athletes thrive on habit and routine. And, you know, there are days where you're super tired, but you think, oh, what can I do? You know, I'll go for a little swim. I'll do some stretching. I'll recover a little bit. I'll get myself ready for the next day. And writing similar, you know, there'd be days where I'd blast through 500 words and I might do a few thousand and think, oh, that was great. But maybe the next day I'm tired, I'm stressed. I can just do 500. That's my recovery day. You know, that's just a baseline thing. And I think athletes like can relate to those mindsets quite easily, I think.
Do you call yourself an author now? When I say, Ben, what do you do? Is it, I'm an author?
Yeah. No, I don't know. Yeah. I sort of say, yeah, I'm a writer and content person, or, you know, I fudge it.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. And again, because it's always kind of changing. And I suppose, yeah, even if I never did another book, I could call myself an author, but that wouldn't be what I was doing every day, maybe. You know? Yeah. So yeah, it's a bit like, I suppose it'd be a bit like calling yourself a rugby player, like you were once, but you're not doing it anymore, sort of thing. Yeah. I don't know. It's a funny one. I find that what do you do question is very interesting.
Well, we spoke about this just before with the what do you do question. You touched on, so your first book wasn't Endgame. Well, the first book was Fringes.
Yeah, first book's Fringes. Endgame's my third book.
Endgame's your third, and the second one was the one with Tristan Bevan.
Yes.
Is that Tristan Bevan from Wasp?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was at Wasp when he was there.
Okay.
Is that Tristan? That's a small world. Yeah. But in Endgame, you do speak about that. What do you do question? And when I read it, I was like, I had a very clear moment where the first time after retiring and someone said, what do you do? I almost went to say, I'm a professional rugby player, because I've got used to this little, that's nice. And I had to kind of go, I'm an ex-professional rugby player. And then you get the follow-up of, what do you do now? And you're like, I didn't realise I'd attached myself to that as much as maybe I had. But it's almost the first question everyone asks everyone when they first meet them.
Yeah, and I definitely felt that, where it's easy for people to get excited about I'm a professional athlete, whereas I don't think if you're saying, I'm just taking some time figuring out what to do next or whatever, no one gets excited about that. I think actually people feel awkward. I think quite often people feel awkward. And I think there is a generally quite unhealthy attitude to over-identifying everyone with their work. And it only became clear to me a bit like you when I stopped playing rugby that this was a thing. So now when I meet people, I do try and delay that conversation, even if I'm curious about what it is they are doing. I try and see if we can get on anyway. And then when I find out that they're not doing an impressive job, then I stop talking to them.
On to the next. That's funny because I was never a top rugby player.
No, well, me neither. Yeah.
Played a bit of Premiership, a bit of Champions Cup for a small period of time, but not enough where people recognise me. And there's two groups of people I find. There are people that know their rugby, and there are people that don't rugby at all. Now, I don't know which one's better for me to meet, because the worst thing is when you meet someone that does know rugby and they say, who do you play for? And I might say, I played at Wasps. And they go, oh, I was a Wasps fan. I don't remember you. That's actually worse than someone who doesn't know rugby, because for someone who doesn't know rugby, you say a professional rugby player, there's no difference between me and Owen Farrell in their mind. Obviously, there's a huge difference. But for them, it's like, I'm a professional athlete.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I think the ones who actually know rugby might be worse. Because then you go, oh, yeah, I played there for a little bit of whatever. But yeah, but you go into it. But it's definitely something where you finish and that void is there. 100%. It's funny because Cam Whitnall, who I had on here as well, also couldn't really describe what he did. It's like a sort of a 5-minute chat about, well, I kind of did this, this, and this. So you've done 3 books: Fringes, Endgame, and Our Race.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
So how did you end up doing Our Race?
Well, it's because of Fringes. So I did Fringes. I did it all myself. A publisher, no publishers, or the agent I spoke to was like, oh, this is going to be a difficult sell, even though I think it's quite good. He was like, you can make it better. And I was already interested in the idea of kind of going it alone. And I think when you're particularly in a team sport, you have a lot of things decided for you. And I really felt this was a good opportunity for me to make, be totally responsible for something. And I actually really enjoyed that element of it. But then after that came out and did quite well, then Tristan got in touch with me. We didn't know each other. And basically the sprint relay guys from the Athens Olympics, so the GB 4x100 team who won gold, the men's team. And one of them had done an individual book with Tristan, but they hadn't necessarily enjoyed the sort of experience they'd had with whichever publisher. And he said, oh, there's this rugby guy who's done this himself, So I spoke to them, and in the end, it worked out being a really mutually beneficial project, because I was a little bit like, oh, how do I follow that up? I've got nothing else to say, So, and this was a great opportunity to work with some, people who did the very best, but they had their own things, they weren't necessarily as successful individually as they might have liked, but they had this incredible kind of team triumph, David versus Goliath type story. And they'd all overcome their own kind of, they all had slightly different challenges in their kind of their background or in their like training experiences, their competitive experiences. So it was a really interesting project to do, and co-authoring it was actually really fun, because obviously writing and these things, at the time I was doing lots of freelance writing for clients as well. It's quite solitary. So actually, as I got to know Tristan better, it was a super fun thing to be able to do together. And also he's from a sort of sports environment, so he understands, like we had a kind of easy rapport, I suppose, like because, we both worked in similar sort of places.
How does co-authoring work? So do you just take little stabs at each chapter, or what's the?
Yeah, we communicate a lot. So he'd already done a draft. I can't remember. I don't think it was finished, but I basically went through and did a rewrite using the sort of bones of what he had, because he'd done a lot of, interview stuff with the 4 guys and various other people relating to them. And I did a rewrite. And then once we'd gone through, then we almost had a kind of co-authored draft, I suppose. And we could be a lot more ruthless about, okay, like this is good, that's bad, this needs to move. And we started sort of coming up with a structure that we thought would work a bit better. And because you've got 4 guys, you need to, introduce everyone to these 4 guys, but you also need the main story to move forward. So the timeline jumps around a bit, but I think we came up with a way of making it work in the end. But it was fun to have that other person to bounce the ideas off, like while it was happening, because otherwise you could present an editor with a piece of work and they'll just be like, oh, this is terrible. Yeah. So we were quite good at kind of course correcting, I think, on the way through. And the one bit of feedback we did get from test readers was that the ending, everyone was like, oh, I felt like this. And then when I got to the end, I felt a certain way. And I think when enough people tell you the same thing, I think, you can overreact to one opinion. And but I think when a few people tell you the same thing, then there's something in it. So we went back and we redid the ending, and then it proved to be a better bit of work. So that was really useful to kind of get feedback from people who were coming at it fresh, I suppose.
Yeah. It's interesting. You've done quite a few courses. You feel those courses really like stepped it up for you?
I don't think all of them. But yeah, definitely some of them. I think what they do for you, I think a lot of the benefit, a bit like getting a PT, a lot of people know, they should go for a run or they should do whatever, but actually it's the accountability. And I think being in a group, having a deadline, the teacher you'll probably learn enough from the instructor, but actually just that experience of being in a group as well is super useful. But
there's definitely something to be said for that, isn't there? I think I was looking up some sort of readership stats and how many, obviously it's just from Kindle, so you see how many people finish books. And even, well-known books like Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, it's something like 7% people finish the book.
That's quite a dense book, though. I think that's that's not a simple read,
no.
I don't think.
But the funny thing was I went and had a look at what the highest percentage was. It was something like 64%. Just in general in life, the ability to finish things can probably set you apart from a lot of people.
I'm quite stubborn when I pick something like that. I think there are certain ways in which I can be quite stubborn. And so, yeah, I think even if I don't feel like doing it, I'll be like, sort of have a word with myself and be like, no, you committed, you're doing it kind of thing, and just get through. So, yeah, but I don't think with reading books, I don't mind if people don't read books. I think if you stop, if you're reading a book and it's not for you, like, as long as you gave it a fair effort, a fair chance. I think some people advocate things like, if you're particularly a non-fiction book, if you're reading a non-fiction book and it's a bit boring, be like, okay, and like skip forward to another chapter. If it's still boring, like get out of there. There's so many other books. There's so many great books.
It's certainly something I struggle with. I've just got this sort of completion thing where I'm having this book with a little fold halfway there that's forever going to be there. It just bugs me.
Yeah, you need to iron the page.
Yeah. And the three bits you've written so far, so I haven't really explained what they are, but Fringes is about your career in rugby.
Yeah.
Endgame is about what you need to do after you finish playing professional sport, sort of a guide for ex-professionals or potential ex-professionals, which is all of it. And then Our Race, which is about the 4x100 team in Athens. Do you have aspirations to write any fiction at all?
I'd love to. I think like when I was growing up, and you think, I'll write a book one day. And the books I loved were fiction, they were novels and adventure stories and whatever else. And I would absolutely love to. I just think with the first, people always say like first book's about yourself. And I think that's where I was. And it was a really perfect project. It did so many things for me at the same time. But yeah, I like to think with each book, I'm getting slightly further away from sport maybe, but I'm working on a couple of novel ideas. I add to them every so often, but yeah, I think I'm just kind of messing around and enjoying myself at the moment. I think like I'll know it's serious if I actually finish a draft.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There's going to be a novel, a little novella perhaps?
Yeah. And I think, so with Endgame, I was very much like you're saying, you didn't do loads of reading when you were competing. And I don't think there's quite a lot of athletes that I've met that don't read a lot. So this Endgame book, I felt if I make it as short as I can and as useful as I can, then people can get through it very quickly. It doesn't seem intimidating. It's only about 100 pages. It's handbook size. You can put it in your pocket. There's obviously the audiobook version as well. Like loads of people like love audio, and they're not often not the same people. A lot of people who read will only read, and a lot of people who listen to audiobooks will only listen to books, so that's quite nice. And I felt that if I made it really concise and useful, then I could kind of, just be as useful as possible to the reader. And I think there is a bit of a trend for shorter novels. I think like Claire Keegan is a short story writer, really, who I've gotten really into over the last couple of years. And she's released a couple of books where they're 60, 70, 80 pages. And I think people are much happier to kind of give a really short bit of fiction a go. So yeah, I don't see why not. But I think the idea I've got now would be, probably a couple of 100 pages at least, I think, because it's got various things that need explaining. Yeah.
Can't rush it.
Yeah, exactly.
And Endgame was really useful. Jamie, it was a very good book. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And you mentioned as well, you worked for Laps, which is Life After Professional Sport, and you went into Manchester United, did a few talks there with their younger guys. But I remember people coming in and talking to me about Life After Professional Sport, use your network. And I listened and went, yeah, all true, didn't do any of it. And I think that's probably one of the problems there is there's just, actually, I'm not going to, what do you think is the reason people don't do it when they need to?
Yeah, I think it probably just is a slight fear factor about it. I think in Endgame, I quote this guy, Jorge Valdano, used to play for Real Madrid. And he was saying it's like, with footballers, it's like thinking about death. They don't want to do it. And it's like, it's the same thing. You just think, I don't really, the idea that there is this kind of inherent end to what I'm doing, that I'm sort of vulnerable to that end at any point. You could obviously get hurt or something, could happen. People don't like to think about it. But I think it feels like people have gotten better. You talked about Man United, and those guys that I spoke to there were very young, 16, 17, 18. And the younger guys were very much like football. Whereas I felt with the guys who are a little bit older, they'd maybe already moved team once or twice and they realized how precarious their situation was. So I think, it needs to be encouraged. And I think it doesn't need to be a big deal. I think the idea that it is this sort of a huge deal that you need to commit loads and loads of time to is probably the wrong way to go about it. It's more, what are you like, what else are you interested in? And also making that kind of habit with it, where it's like, okay, I've done my training today. What am I doing for the rest of my life? The other things that interest me, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, however long it is. Because that feeling of just always nudging along these other aspects of yourself is what will help you kind of get rolling and get developing some plans for beyond sport. So I think the idea that everybody needs to start a business while they're playing rugby or, whatever it is, it doesn't need to be super time consuming. I think the idea that it's this big serious thing probably holds people back. I think it's like, it is a serious thing and that's why you should start approaching it. But you should probably start approaching it in a kind of low key, low stakes way just to get yourself kind of going, I think. And maybe that's it. Maybe it seems too big a question to confront.
Yeah, I actually remember the RPA once brought in a will writing seminar.
Oh, wow.
It was about will writing. I remember I didn't want to go to it. I was like, I don't want to think about that. But that's obviously more literal to do with death. But I definitely think it's one of those where I'm going to have a long career. I have plenty of money. I don't need to worry about this right now. I don't want to. I was in the academy. We used to get sent to the boxes all the time because the bigger players didn't want to do it. And I used to think, if I had that chance now, I'd be I'd be working the room, I'd be making the most of it. But do you think there's an element of, when the student is ready, the master will appear, and you're just probably not in the right place to receive the information at that time?
Yeah, probably. I think one of my regrets, I suppose, is that I didn't start talking about books in public while I was playing rugby, because I think you're just more interesting while you are an athlete. Everybody, like we said earlier, what do you do? I'm an athlete. But also I love these things, or I'm into this. Suddenly people will join the dots for you in ways that you can't predict. And I think I do slightly regret not having talked about books while I was playing rugby. It would have been quite unusual, quite weird. I could have probably made a bit of hay out of it sooner than I have. I think it's an accelerant, definitely. I think being an athlete is probably an accelerant for anything else you want to do, just because, more people will talk to you.
Yeah, I do think that's true. And I think I actually had a few tough times right after I retired where I'd sent some messages to people for a bit of help who were like, no.
Yeah.
Or just didn't even reply. And I was a bit like, ooh, they used to reply to me really quickly before I retired. And now it's that was within about 8 months. So obviously it was more sort of false relation than you thought, but then there are other people who are super helpful and really want to help that no matter what. But there is a realization period of, okay, that's now behind me. You've got to try and utilize it now.
Yeah, there are a lot of you, and you are immediately replaced. And no matter how good you are, as soon as you stop, someone else is there in your spot, wearing your number, whatever it is, and you are immediately replaced, and the world moves on. And so you do need to do it while you're competing. I think that's the best approach anyway.
Yeah, I did the bit in the book where you spoke about the WhatsApp group, and that sometimes is genuinely you're leaving. You might have a big end of year social, but it's not exactly a very civilized goodbye where you get to say, hey, man, it's been great all year.
Yeah.
All the best. It's usually a bit one of two ways. So that is a moment where I've had times where I actually haven't left the group. So I didn't want to do a big leaving. And then you just kind of are there and eventually someone removes you a year down the line. It's quite a sad little moment. You're like, okay, well, that's that.
We had a weird one. I think our French one, everyone stayed in it and they added guys the next year, but then I think they ended up making a whole new group for the team. But actually, there is still this group that's a sort of, the ghost of our former team, which is quite weird. But
yeah, and I've always found it weird with rugby. I've moved around a little bit in my career. I know you have, but you can be almost best friends with people at a club. And then after a season or 2 seasons, you move and you don't see them at all for years.
It's quite strange. Someone, one of my teammates' mums said something where it was friends for a season, friends for a reason. I was like, oh, that's kind of cheesy, but sort of sneakily quite profound. Yeah.
Where was your favourite place to play?
I actually did love being in France, just generally. I think like when I was young and kind of, it was all new and exciting and, I had sort of these aspirations and things like that was exciting too. And I very much loved like being a young guy and playing for Bath, whether that was academy teams or, whatever it was. But I did love France as a place, like their attitude to rugby. They love it. The home team vibe, going away, getting a very hostile reception. That was great. Just the whole thing was fantastic. So I'd encourage anyone, France is obviously booming, but, their rugby is booming from the lower divisions all the way to the very elite level. And it's just the most rugby mad place. I know New Zealand and South Africa are, but I think France is such a big place that has, or even these village teams, just people going wild for it. So I just loved that whole atmosphere around it.
It is very different, even to UK. It's more the UK rugby. It's good, but on the whole, it's quite like reserved. It's the gentleman's sport, whatever it is. There's not as much sort of almost a tribal nature. Whereas I remember the first away game I ever played in France was Toulouse, and they drive the coach right by the pitch, and they're all up on things. You come out there screaming. I was a bit like, what the hell is going on here? I'm not used to this at all.
Yeah.
It is a really special atmosphere.
Yeah, and I think that there's stuff like they have brass bands in the crowd. They have all these different things going on, but it traditionally was rough as well. Like I know rugby back in the day was maybe a little bit rougher, a bit more violent than we're used to seeing now. But France has a particular reputation for that kind of thing. So I think there is that sort of very sort of raw element to that. And while those things don't happen so often, I think there is still that sort of residual sort of feeling. The expression of it is this kind of, you're not coming here to win. Yeah. La guerre.
Yeah. It is nice to be part of those sort of things. One atmosphere was actually really good. That small crowd, it was London, Scottish, Richmond.
Oh, right.
I was only there for 1 season. We had 2 games. Richmond had just been promoted that year or the year before. And it was you only have 2,000-3,000 in there, but you actually felt this real rivalry. And since I've been at school, I hadn't really been part of games like that. And there's something about being part of something that's a bit more than just the rugby. Whereas even in the Premiership, it's very professional. I'm sure other people have experienced great games, but I never really got to. But that Richmond, London, Scottish felt that we played on their pitch, and it was quite charged, like little tackles. It was quite good.
I think some of these things, these smaller experiences can be so, they're quite moving in a strange way. I remember we went on a rugby tour to New Zealand when we were young. We were probably 16, 17. We played this big New Zealand rugby school. The whole school was there, like on the bank. They were broadcasting it. They had like local radio there. They did the haka on the field, like at us before the game. And even before the game, we went into their school assembly and they got the whole school around us in this courtyard. It was a big stone courtyard with walls all around. And the whole school did the haka around us, stood in the middle, and the sounds bouncing off all the walls. I just thought, like, it stuck with me forever. It was incredible. Yeah. So, are we going to get out? Yeah.
The bit I want to come on to now is the social media side. So that's where I actually first saw you. I think I reached out to ask about a few books for you to recommend. But I did trawl back and sort of October 2022 when you put out your first kind of social media.
Okay,
if I can call it that.
I came out
a bit more influence.
Yeah.
How did you find it? Can you just take me through that experience of deciding I'm going to post online? I'm going to do it. I'm not doing like a post to me and my friends and my family. I'm doing a post. Take me through that process.
Yeah. So I was working for Laps, who are Life After Professional Sport, and I'd been there for a couple of years. It was one of those things where I was like, this has been great, but I'd done the first book, maybe the second one, but I was thinking, I've really liked doing this kind of authory stuff. And if you want to be serious, you actually need, social media. You need to be doing it unless you're Sally Rooney or one of the real rock star novelists. It doesn't have to. I really think it's kind of the modern luxury is not having to bother. Yeah. But unfortunately, that's not where I'm at. So, I was like, okay, I need to do some stuff about books. The books I'd written were obviously about sport, but the books I read tend to be, literature of different types. So I was like, okay, I can post and I'll showcase some other skills. So I think I can sit and narrate. I'd already done audiobooks, and I was like, okay, my format could be that I pick a book I like, narrate a short passage, and that can be it. And I thought TikTok has a kind of booming book segment, Book Talk. It's now driving like a lot of publishing kind of decisions, or a lot of publishing trends at least. And this, like you said, it's a couple of years ago. And I thought, okay, this looks like it's, going really well. TikTok has this like virality inbuilt, so it could, go quite quickly. I was already on Instagram, but like you say, I wasn't like really using it. And I just thought, okay, right, I'll go over to TikTok. I've got this format. I can do that, every day for 2 weeks. And none of my friends are over there. So if I do it and it falls flat, or it's embarrassing, or I hate it, I can just can it. No one will ever know. And the first post actually did really well. And so then I carried on and ended up sort of just pulling on the thread. I was really enjoying it. I was enjoying the kind of the feedback, the book interactions. I started doing live reads on there as well. And then I started growing some following, and people started seeing it. So I started getting DMs from friends with screenshots and be like, what is going on? So I was like, oh,
covert post.
Yeah. I was like, I'm going to have to get ahead of this. So I started, when I saw my friends, I had to come out as a TikToker. And so I am now. Yeah. And, but it was funny because it had already gotten a little bit of traction at that point. They're like, oh, wow. And then, it's just carried on. So it's a sort of general source of amusement for us, but it's become its own thing. It's been great. It's been one of the best things I've done actually is start sharing about books on there. And TikTok have been great. I do stuff with them, work on some of their book related projects like book club or their book awards. And it's just been like a really, really super fun experience. So I definitely was not excited by the thought of putting that first post out there. But I think picking the format, picking a kind of cadence that I knew I could do, every day for 2 weeks, and then just seeing what would happen. And I think that was just in hindsight, a really good approach to getting going. And I'm going to keep going with it because it's just brought me a lot of good things.
Is that what you did? You went every day for 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Well, and did you plan that, or was it like, what's I do today?
I just thought, I'm going to do this, almost run an experiment. Let me do this. I know I can repeat this format of post. I don't have to do anything else. I'll do that for 2 weeks and just sort of see what the results are. And then because it had gone quite well and it was kind of inherently quite encouraging, I thought, okay, well, I'll keep going. But then I started having to think about, okay, I can't keep doing this same format. So what else could I do? And then, you start sort of looking at the platform, seeing what other people are doing and sort of adapting or getting ideas from other people and doing all that sort of stuff. But to begin with, I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this. And that was a good decision, I think.
How long did it take where you decided, I think I'm going to start posting online before you actually post online?
I'd always resisted doing Instagram posts and stuff. I don't know. It just wasn't something I ever enjoyed. But actually, I think it was a failure of imagination to not, like I said, post stuff about books earlier. I think that would have been fine. And it was, all the people I knew I liked reading books. It wasn't that I was embarrassed of reading books. It was more putting yourself out in another way was something I had some resistance towards. So But once I thought, okay, are you serious about wanting to kind of do more book writing, do more work like in and around books? Once I thought that, then I was like, okay, this is going to have to happen. So it became not a choice, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. We spoke about a little bit before about this idea that you think you're going to get this judgment, and it's not a new concept, but you do feel this kind of, people will think certain things. You don't even know what they're going to think. They're probably not even going to think about it. If they do, they're never even going to tell you that what they thought. It's kind of in your own head a little bit.
I think everyone's busy, and unless you're doing something sort of super embarrassing, in which case you might actually deserve that feedback, then it's like, I think most people are busy. They've got their own lives, their own things going on, and they probably won't even notice.
Yeah. You just mentioned, you mentioned it took you a little while to release your first book before Christmas. You were like, I've got to put a deadline on this.
Yeah.
Was that mainly like a fear of failure, or just I don't want to find out, or what was that?
I think it's a bit of both. I think it was, like I said, I sort of knew it was finished, but by the same token, it was done. I knew it could be better. But I think I'd really enjoyed it. I'd really enjoyed the actual writing of it. It wasn't sort of torturous or difficult. It was difficult in a sort of testing way, but it wasn't difficult. I really loved the doing of the project. So it was quite sad. I almost didn't want to stop doing it.
Yeah.
But it was also definitely a fear of like the reception, if people would think it was bad. My test I got some test readers. One of my closest friends, actually, he test read it for me first. And we actually then sort of made a date to meet up and talk about it. And that's not, again, how we behave. So I was really nervous. And he said, he's like, this is really good. And he's like, he said, I was really worried it was going to be bad. And I didn't know what I would do if it was. I thought I might just lie. And then I was like, how do I know you're telling me the truth now then, mate? Yeah, that was definitely really, really encouraging. And then after that, I did, was in the sort of edit process, and there were more things after that. But I think because those initial responses were positive, then I was pleased. And I was worried about maybe what some of my teammates might think or whatever. But I thought that while I might have said critical things about other people, I wanted to make sure that I was as critical of myself as I was of other people, because otherwise, that felt unfair.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think I let myself off in that first book.
Yeah, that's an interesting point around the feedback as well. I realised I was kind of making a mistake with fear. Often I'd ask for my dad does a similar thing to what I do now. I'd ask him for feedback on something. And what I'm actually doing is I'm quite proud of it. And I want him to be like, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
But because I've asked him for feedback, it's sort of almost this sort of implicit critique it, please. I need you to add value to this. So he thinks, well, I don't give you any pointers, that he's not doing anything helpful. So he comes back going, yeah, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm going, I just wanted
to say, well done.
So it's kind of the way you frame it. You say, look, I'm actually really proud of this. What do you think? Or you say, I need to make this better. Can you please do it?
Yeah.
And then you get...
And I think because I hadn't done it before, and I was very keen for anything that could make it better. So actually I was okay with, in that scenario, while it was still closed, it wasn't sort of public, it wasn't ready, it wasn't out there. I think while it was closed, I was quite happy with the critical feedback. Whereas, I think once it's out there, then, review wise, I was nervous about it. But it's very hard to get anyone to care. And it's the same, social posts are similar. It's like, it's hard. The world's busy. It's loud. There's a lot going on. It's hard to get people to care, and it's hard to get people to sit and read, spend 10 hours reading a book. It's not easy, and people don't have the time. So
I think the social media thing is really interesting, because it's not like you have this plan of, I'm going to post on social media with the intention of getting this. You just don't know what's going to come.
Yeah.
You're just putting yourself out there enough where things do come. Like you said, you've had a few podcast requests, you had this, you've had that have come that you'd never intended for that to be the outcome, but it is. And it's sort of there's a lottery of what comes from it, but you have to buy enough tickets.
Yeah, I think social posts, that you're right, they're lottery tickets. It's like you're pulling the slot machine each time. I think when you refresh the feed, that is designed explicitly to resemble pulling a slot machine. That is actually what you're doing. And I think, the more followers, the better, I think, in terms of seeing people seeing your posts. But there is still a huge element of randomness, and I think the way that the algorithms work now is that actually something from a small account could go huge. If it catches the right mood, time, if it's really good in whatever respect it's trying to, to be interesting. So yeah, I think you're right. There's a huge element of randomness. And I think in a way it's, again, quite a good lesson to learn. Actually, you've just got to take shots on goal. And again, there's loads of sport metaphors for this, aren't there? It's like, Michael Jordan, I think it's Michael Jordan saying you miss 100% of the shots you don't take or whatever. But in the NBA...
That's great, Stu. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, yeah. In the...
It's good one, mate. Michael Scott.
Yeah, Michael Scott. In the NBA, if you shoot your 3-point shots at 40%, that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And actually, like 40%, you think, oh, you'd assume they'd be better, but they're not, and it's good. It means you have to take a lot of things and expect a lot of things to fail. I think there's a really good speech from Roger Federer at a US university recently. I don't know if you've seen that. And he says something similar where he only ever won 50% of the points he played or something.
Yeah.
So it's like, you have to do something, try, your best and then move on because, the result is out of your hands. And social media is definitely somewhere where the results are largely out of your hands.
Yeah. Well, I actually noticed, you don't do too many it doesn't seem like you're trying to work the algorithm at all. You just do stuff you're happy with.
Yeah, I think partly that's maybe some laziness and I should probably get a bit better at sort of doing those things. But I think also, yeah, it's like you could go insane, I think, if you tether yourself too closely to what's going on these platforms, or if you get too het up about, the behind the scenes things. And I think, yeah, as long as you're okay doing what you're doing, I think that's fine. And then, you have to make your peace with that. Whereas if you were very attuned to like the result, if you were like, oh, I need this to get this many views, you're almost setting yourself up for disappointment quite quickly and to get quite frustrated. Whereas for me, with the book stuff, writing and narrating and doing kind of book related projects, those are things I want to do. At the minute, I don't see myself stopping doing those things. So it's like, well, I'm in this for the long term. I'm not that worried about what one thing does. I'd like it to do well, obviously, but I think I'm more about, okay, like I'm going to be doing this for a while. So let's like not get too, like we said earlier, not get too up or too down about the day to day.
Yeah, definitely. I think I work with a few sales teams as well since doing what I do now. And I remember hearing that the top salesperson in this company, it was something like 24% close rate. And that was the absolute best salesperson. So 75% of the time, they're just striking out. And I was quite surprised, but I thought they'd be a real killer, like 89%. So I was like, actually, it just stinks of failure. Everyone on the cold calls, they might call 100 and only one person even responds to them. And then they just tell them off. So
yeah, for sure.
It is, I imagine social media the same, but I have no idea. We'll talk with them.
Yeah, no, these things are like that. There's a lot of people. I think one of the things that I learned about, when I was doing freelance writing, and there are certain things. So I think, being a pro athlete is something a lot of people want to do, but writing about sport, writing about music, writing about those things, fashion, those things, loads of people want to do. So the industry can afford to have loads of people working for free or for very little money, whatever it is. You are less likely to get paid well doing, content in those verticals. But if you want to write about something that's unpopular, that seems unglamorous, you can probably get paid quite well because there's just fewer people who want to do it. So there's this whole sort of set of checks and balances that you need to kind of figure out what it is, you want to be doing exactly. And yeah, the rules of that particular little game, I suppose.
And you've got a fourth book in the works as well.
Yeah, so it's actually another one with Tristan Bevan. So it's called Super Strengths. So there's a concept that gets bandied around. You hear it a lot on sports coverage now, but it's used kind of internally when people are kind of selecting or constructing sports teams. And it's super strength. It's like, what is that guy or girl? Like, what are they overwhelmingly good at? What is their one quality? Why would I pick them for the team? Like, what are they bringing? And they are the best that we have access to at that thing. They might be a great kicker, could be really fast if we're in a rugby context. They could be the best scrummager, whatever it is. There'll be some sort of element that they'll be like, okay, that person brings that. And Super Strengths, the book, takes that concept, explores it, breaks it down, how it works, how you improve on your strengths, informed by some of the kind of performance literature and stuff that Tristan, as a head of performance, knows very well. And then we've taken the concept and taken it outside of sport. So sort of sliced it up in these different ways, different verticals, sort of to show people how they can think about their kind of personal strength, their super strength, and apply it to whatever they're doing. And it's actually been really fun. I think it's a bit kind of Malcolm Gladwell-y, taking something, seeing the rest of the world, and being, okay, like that's what that person's doing, that's what that lawyer's doing, that's what that, content creator's doing. There's all these different versions that we've picked these examples from, and a little bit like Endgame, we've made it quite concise. So it's only about 150 pages and people can get through it quite quickly. We wanted to have a very high kind of utility rate in a way. It's like, is this useful? And I feel like we've condensed it to a point where there's not too much fluff. I write a weekly newsletter on Substack, which actually I find on Thursday, I do it like every week. And it means that every week I've got this, like there's a deadline, there's an expectation, there's a format, it keeps me looking out throughout the week for interesting things to like spark, my imagination. And I get this rough material together, and then it's almost a test of my writing ability every week. So I feel like, even if that work goes nowhere beyond the email newsletter, then it's actually just useful for me to like, improve my skill in a way, or keep testing myself. And yeah, that's been really fun. And now it's becoming its own thing. I've got people paid subscribers now for my Substack, which is another kind of revenue stream for me as an author.
Is the focus mainly sport, or are there examples from all over? Or?
No, so I think there's two books we really liked as examples, and they actually are quite closely related to each other. So it's Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, which it starts with this example of Tiger Woods as an example of deliberate practice. And there's another book called Range by David Epstein, which takes that Tiger Woods example, but contrasts it with Roger Federer. And Roger Federer did not specialize in tennis until his late teens. He was always playing football and other sports. He actually declined going up a level in tennis so he could carry on playing with his friends, I think. And his mum was a tennis coach, but she never sort of forced him down a track too early. So both those books start with sporting examples and then broaden out to bring in the rest of the world. And I think sport's just a really useful framework to look at other things, because it's an accelerated, sort of intensified version of life. It obviously happens in this kind of extreme way, at this extreme pace, in these extreme environments, and it happens in a short time. So it's easy to look at. But actually, there's lots of parallels you can draw with the rest of life. And so we've got, it starts with sport as a sort of, here's a really clear example of this. And then it's going, okay, and you can see now how it relates to these people in these other domains. Because I think otherwise you're just like, okay, well, that's useful for sport, but not for anyone else. Whereas I think this is a concept that people could use more broadly.
Okay, that's awesome. And the Federer thing, I actually did hear you mention that on the other podcast you did recently. Because you mentioned he's your GOAT as well.
Yeah, I love him.
I'm the same actually. He's just so, he's so fluid, isn't he? But I would have thought he was a tennis since he was 4.
Yeah.
Proper.
Yeah, you'd expect. And I think that's the other thing, is people come to these things in different ways, don't they?
But look, we've been going for quite a while now. I'll jump out some quick fire questions.
That's it.
We'll start off with, I've chucked in a few book ones for you as well.
Oh, good. So, thank you. Yeah. You like them? Yeah.
So your Desert Island book.
Count of Monte Cristo.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's super long. You can read it over and over again. It's great.
I've not read it.
You should. It's fantastic. I think there's a series coming out as well, so you should get ahead of it. Yeah.
Come on. Best film adaptation of a book.
I think in terms of like a bad book to a really good film is City of God. It's this old Brazilian like kind of gangland film, because the book's quite boring. It's like a sort of journalistic-y sort of book, but the film's super exciting. But I think the other one is probably just like Fight Club. Like it's a really good book, but the film, through its casting, through some of its like visual choices, like it's obviously like a kind of all-time film. Whereas the book is a great book, but it's not necessarily something that everyone's reading.
Yeah, good choice. Books that change your way of thinking.
Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb.
Okay, and just for our listeners, what's the general?
It is how disorder makes you stronger. So the example he uses is of like the Hydra, you cut off a head and 2 sprouts. So it's I think, like, again, things like weight training are a good example that actually you're stressing yourself and you're technically sort of tearing your muscles, but actually that makes you stronger. So there's these ways that he slices that concept up and shows you how it sort of acts in the world. It's really interesting.
Best advice you've ever received?
Ooh. Actually, the one thing I always like remember explicitly was when I actually left rugby, my friend's dad, he offered like some work at his business, and he was like, this whole sort of transition process, he just said to me, like, this is going to take longer than you'd like.
Right, okay.
And I was like, no, wait. And then, and he's exactly right. And I think with most things in life, like, whatever your expectations, they'll probably take longer. And it's good to kind of have some patience, I think, like with yourself.
That's a good one. Dream dinner party.
What guest?
Yeah. Alive or dead. If you want to, it's so broad. If you want to pick maybe 3 authors or something like that, keep you on brand.
I don't know about author. I don't know if they're all super fun. I always think like Zadie Smith. She is an author, and I saw her speak live once, and she is super interesting, and she seems cool. So I think someone like her. I think like sport, rugby wise, yeah, maybe Roger Federer. That'd be pretty sweet, wouldn't it? Have Roger Federer. One more. So some sort of like. I don't know. Yeah. I can't think of it. This is like amazing. I go back. Oh, the guy from The Wire, the main guy, Dominic West. Oh, yeah. I love The Wire. He seems loose. I think he'd bring some energy.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good 3 actually.
Yeah. Thank you.
Biggest regret?
Ooh. I think maybe not being like a bit more risky with my decisions or a bit more adventurous when I was younger. I think I was quite adventurous, but I think like maybe you could have just done a little bit more or been a little bit bolder. I think be bold is something that when young, do these talks with younger people and stuff, it's like, oh yeah, be bold. Like, you're young, go for it. Like, why not? I think if I'd been a little bit bolder, that'd have been nice. Yeah.
Okay. So this one is, if you could turn into any animal, what would it be? But you can't have anything that's gone before, which means you can't be an eagle and you can't be a bat.
No. Everyone just wants to fly. That's the problem.
Will not be different.
Yeah. Maybe like a gazelle, just roaming free on the plains. That for me, yeah. Graceful, glorious.
Well, you might get eaten though. You can turn into it any time you want.
Yeah.
You're not hit forever.
But I think if I can't do, if everyone's picking flight, because I think that's the obvious thing. Everyone wants to fly. Maybe be a penguin.
Because that's a penguin. It's an alpha animal going out.
I think that'd be the best pet, a penguin. Yeah. Be like, what's that? It's like, that's my pet.
That's
a penguin.
I've seen people that train crows.
Okay.
Crows that have like fallen out, and if you get them when they've just like fallen out of a nest, train them.
It's quite weird. That is quite Game of Thrones, actually.
Yeah. And then final one, proudest moment.
Probably. Yeah, it was probably actually when my first book, it went to top of the sports chart on Amazon. It was like beat the Tyson Fury and Mike Tyson books, and I was just like, oh, it's pretty sweet, actually.
Was that quite surreal?
Yeah, it was really weird. And it was in COVID, so I was like sat there on my own, like looking at my laptop, like
it's refreshing.
Yeah. It's still there, yeah. Screenshotting it before someone realised something's gone wrong, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, that was great.
Perfect. Well, look, thank you so much for coming over and spending the time. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, well, treat.
And welcome back anytime. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
So there we have it, Mr. Ben Mercer. Real life proof that athletes can have brawn and brains. And there I was thinking it was just me. As always, thank you so much for spending the time listening, and have a great week.